I am now gonna turn the mic over to myself here and chat a little bit about what active bystandership really is and how it works. So for those of you who joined late, I'm Jonathan Aronie. I'm a partner at the law firm of Sheppard Mullin, where I run the investigations practice group, and I'm also the chair of the Abel Project Board of Advisors. Now, I'm also the federal monitor over the New Orleans Police Department consent decree, although I'm not wearing that hat today. I mentioned the monitorship really just to give my comments some context. So back in 2014, a small group of New Orleans police officers, leadership, and community members came to me and asked me for help setting up the country's first department-wide active bystandership program. I mean, to borrow a phrase from a movie that will surely date me, they had me at hello. Indeed, I was so taken by the power of the program that I committed to support it 100% pro bono. And I want to be clear that I have done that since its origin. All my work on Epic and Abel is all pro bono. I plan to use my 15 minutes here to really do three things: to tell you a bit more about what active bystandership is, to offer a few observations about how we know it works, and to provide some history of our journey from a very successful department-wide active bystandership program in New Orleans called Epic to the current national platform for active bystandership training, the Abel Project. So let's start with the basics. What is an active bystander? Well, as I'm sure Professor Staub will provide us all with a more scientific definition shortly, to me, an active bystander is someone who is willing to intervene in another's conduct to prevent harm, often when others fail to do so. As Chiefs Noel and Thomas will describe in a moment, when we created the New Orleans Epic Peer Intervention Program, our goal was to give police officers concrete and realistic skills and tactics that they could use to do three things: prevent harm to civilians, prevent harm to officers, and to promote officer health and wellness. Now, Chiefs Noel and Thomas and Westbrook will talk more about those three pillars as the morning goes on, but I'd like to offer a few observations of my own based on my experience working with police officers as an outsider for almost a decade. I want to start with the first pillar I mentioned, preventing harm to civilians. How an intervention can prevent harm to civilians is obvious to most people. If you want to understand what an intervention is, just watch the video from Minneapolis and focus on what the bystander officers did not do. And then go watch the video from Seattle and watch how one officer physically grabs his partner's knee and forcibly moves it from the neck to the back. And you immediately see what active bystandership is. But it's important to note that while these situations make the news and go viral, intervention tactics come into play in countless less lethal settings, from knowing how to calm a colleague who is losing his or her temper, to redirecting an officer who's about to conduct an improper search. The second pillar I mentioned, preventing harm to officers, I want to talk about that one too. So years ago, I had the great misfortune to watch a very well-respected police officer get murdered by a suspect in the backseat of his police car. The suspect, who had a gun in his belt, that was not caught in a very poor search and a very poor job in handcuffing that preceded the subject being put into the back of this police officer's car. Well, while in the car, the suspect got his hands from behind him, under his legs, and in front of him because the handcuffs were put on wrong. He reached into his belt and he pulled a gun out. He reached through the partition of the police car and he shot the officer to death right above his vest. I watched the officer die many, many times on that video. Multiple police officers had an opportunity to notice and say something about that bad search and the bad handcuffing that ultimately led to the horrible, tragic death, but none said a thing. If just one officer had had the skills to be an active bystander in that setting, the police officer would be alive today, and his two daughters and his son would have a father today. Now, finally, I want to talk briefly about the third pillar of active bystandership, which is health and wellness. We all know the horrible statistics about officer health and wellness. We know that officer suicides have now surpassed officer line of duty deaths. And we know the numbers about depression and alcoholism and divorce in this very stressful profession. I know Dr. Dvoskin will speak more about this shortly, but suffice it here to say that the skills taught through Abel and previously through EPIC are directly applicable to helping a colleague through tough times, just as applicable as they are to prevent misconduct and mistakes. Now, I concede that when I say all this, that we all should do a better job becoming active bystanders and stepping in to help our friends and colleagues. It sounds like a no-brainer. Indeed, I sometimes get asked why we need to teach this at all. But the truth is, while many of us are active bystanders from time to time, most of us are also passive bystanders far too often. And police are no different from the rest of us. Yet, this is something that can be taught and it can be learned, and it is a skill we all would use more if we had the confidence in how to do it. So how do we know it works, you ask? Let me just give you 4 reasons really quickly. First, Abel, just like EPIC before it, is based on decades of research, including some very creative field studies, which I suspect Professor Staub will tell us a little bit more about in a bit. Second, the principles of active bystandership have been employed to combat all manner of pressing national problems, from drunk driving to hospital operating room errors, to airline accidents, to sexual assaults on college campuses. In fact, on college campuses, several studies have shown that active bystandership programs not only significantly reduce sexual assault in particular, but they reduce violence against women in general. Third, we conduct a biennial survey in New Orleans to assess the perception of police officers and community members. On the police officer survey, we assess, among other things, officer perception of their willingness to intervene in another officer's conduct before and after taking EPIC training. Not surprisingly, officers perceive themselves as more likely to intervene after they have had their training. And I think fairly obviously, the more we perceive ourselves as doing something, the more likely we are to do it. And finally, the 4th reason we know it works, at least I know it works, is because I've seen it with my own eyes. As the monitor, I have unfettered access to police officers and police leaders and body-worn camera videos. I also have the opportunity to speak to community members, and I have seen active bystandership work. And frankly, I have seen all over the country the disastrous results when those skills are not employed. And I suspect that the several New Orleans officers and leaders and community members who have joined us for the open house today will tell you the same thing. Let me now just say a few brief words about the journey from EPIC to Abel. As I mentioned earlier, the New Orleans EPIC program has been extremely successful, due in great part to the folks on this call today. While it's hard to lay the transformation that has gone on within the New Orleans Police Department at the feet of any one program, my personal view is that EPIC has played a major role in the cultural change that we have seen over the past few years in that department. That cultural change has led to fewer citizen complaints, fewer unnecessary uses of force, higher citizen satisfaction with the police department, and higher officer satisfaction with their jobs. Now, while NOPD generously has trained multiple agencies outside of New Orleans and outside of Louisiana, following the killing of George Floyd, the demand for active bystandership training became overwhelming. Within a week or 2 of the killing, between the New Orleans Police Department and Georgetown and I, we had received over 100 calls from police agencies asking for help. In short, that's what led us to develop the Abel project at Georgetown. It became quickly apparent we needed a national platform to meet this huge demand. Professor Lopez will give you more details about the Abel project, but for now, I just want to say that that project has allowed us to give the principles of EPIC and the principles of active bystandership a national platform. I couldn't be prouder to be able to play a small role in this. I couldn't be prouder of what the New Orleans Police Department has accomplished through its active bystander training, what Georgetown has been willing to do to bring it national, and what my law firm has done in financially supporting this and allowing me to put in the hundreds, if not thousands, of pro bono hours that I've put in to help. I couldn't be prouder of the other agencies who have so quickly jumped on board. The Philadelphia Police Department, the Baltimore Police Department, the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission, the Northern Virginia Training Commission, the New Hampshire statewide post, and the list goes on, and the calls keep coming in. Let me end with this. There are a lot of programs vying for attention and funding, frankly, these days, but few, in my view at least, offer such a practical, tested, win-win solution to a problem that has vexed the country for decades. With so much dividing our nation, it is wonderful to be involved in something that everyone can get behind. Police officers, police leaders, community members, activists, city leaders, academics, Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, and liberals.